guys, it's Jose Chavez, and I want to give you guys a little bit of info as to where to fish when you come to Florida or to the South in general to do some saltwater fishing. I get a lot of questions from friends. They're like, where do I go? How do I find fish? What am I looking for? And really, this whole fishery revolves around tides. Basically, the water pushes in, the water level moves up, and then the water level recedes and comes back down. And fish are dependent on tides to feed. The reason why fish key into tides and why tides are so important is saltwater fish, they're looking for the best, most convenient times where finding food is going to be easiest for them. They can expend the least amount of energy and they can have the most amount of reward for their energy spent. Why tides are important is because they dictate how food moves around for these fish. So forage will, the tide will come up, and then forage will hide in docks, they'll hide in mangroves, they'll hide in grass, and they do this to get away from predators. But the tide's also gonna recede, and when that happens, all the forage that's hiding in places that are not accessible, they're gonna have to come out. And when they come out, that's gonna be a really good feeding opportunity for these saltwater fish. You can go on Google Earth and take a look, and you'll see deeper channels, deeper parts of water that big flats or big expansive estuaries funnel into when the tide is receding. And those are gonna be just these choke points that are gonna force all the food, all the fish that's on that flat, they're gonna be forced to funnel into that deep water when the water recedes, because the tide swing is so big that those areas there's gonna be no water left. They're not gonna survive. So when the tide is receding, a lot of the times, especially redfish, they're kind of worried about getting to deeper water so they don't have to worry about being exposed. And then once the tide starts coming in, these fish want to be one of the first ones to push up on a flat to see, what birds turned over, what crabs came out and moved around. There's going to be different food opportunities on the flats, and they're going to want to get on the flat, and they're always going to come from deep water. If you can find areas where a large flat funnels into deep water, that's going to be a really good feeding area. So you don't really necessarily need to, get information for locals to have success. You can go on Google Earth, take a look around, get an understanding of what the tide, tide's coming in, tide's going out. Go look at your local tide station. That's going to be really important information. So out of an entire day, there's a few set of hours that are going to be the peak feeding times, and that's going to be when you have the most water movement. So redfish generally want to crawl up onto areas that were previously exposed during a low tide. They're going to want to crawl up on those flats as early as possible and, see what new food sources they can find. Also, when the tide is coming down, when the tide's receding, they're going to be one of the ones that are going to be really concerned about dropping into deep water. Trout in general, they seem to stay in deeper water. So they're going to be, in that 2, 3, 4, 5 foot range over grass flats. And they're just going to eat generally when there's water coming in, water coming out. Some of the bigger trout will hop on really shallow flats and feed as well. But for the most part, if you want to target some speckled trout, if you can find some deep holes with good moving water and some habitat like grass or oyster bars around it, you're going to have good success there. Then when we're talking about snook behave a lot like bass in how they post up on structure and in current. They want to be in areas where there's a lot of current, but they want to be behind a rock, behind a piling, behind some sort of structure. They want to be on the first bend of an eddy, and just have food come to them and take advantage of the opportunity to get an easy meal. Another important thing to keep in mind with, fishing and tides in general, like these shallow flats present really good opportunities. And the way you should really approach them is if you're used to fishing smallmouth bass on flats or just bass on flats in shallow areas in general, fish are kind of moving around, and you should see some sort of activity from it. When you're looking for your places to fish and you go to a place, look around, look for ripples, look for pushes of water, look for nervous water that seems kind of out of place based on the conditions and the wind and the tidal flow, because that's usually an indication of fish activity. And with that fish activity, you want to be working and fishing the area where you're seeing this movement, and you're gonna catch something doing this. So if you find yourself in the South and you have a couple hours to burn, here's some tips that will help you have success on the water.